Today we have Mr. Simon Napier-Bell. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Barry. Lovely to be here.
That was an introduction, wasn't it? Come on.
That was pretty good, yeah. I'm just afraid I'll fall off the other side of the bar and break my neck. But go on.
Great to talk to you. It really is pretty fantastic. Every time, as I said, you touch something, it just gets better and better. So you started in the music industry how?
As a musician, as one should do.
Right. So this is what I've done a bit of research, but I like to just let the person talk to me and tell me. But
Look, when I was about 11 or 12, probably 11, I was given a trumpet, a cornet for Christmas.
right.
And I learned to play it. And prior to that, I sometimes wasted an hour every weekend listening to what was the top 20, whatever it was in those days, which was abysmal music. Yeah, I'm very old. And those who didn't have Radio 1, didn't have pirate radio. It came from Luxembourg on the AM
Wow.
radio. And you couldn't get it till after 11 because AM radio doesn't work during the daytime and it faded in and out. But everyone at school listened, so you listened to, so you knew what was in the top 20. And these were awful songs. I thought, why does anyone like pop music? It's such drivel. Songs like, if I'd known you were coming out of baked a cake, how much is that doggy in the window? Woof woof. They were terrible songs. And so I was given this cornet, and I I messed around with it for a bit, and then someone else gave me a jazz record. It was an EP of Louis Armstrong's top hot six, I guess it was, hot five or hot six. And I suddenly understood what you were meant to do with a cornet. So I set about learning it quite seriously and fell in love with jazz, completely, totally fell in love with jazz. And that was it, really. I just played jazz and listened to jazz for the next 3 or 4 years. You look like you've frozen. You have frozen. That's the great pity. So now what we're going to do. About learning it.
Right.
Start again. You just started recording again. Have you lost anything there?
Yes, from the cornet. Okay, let's go from the cornet.
So I was given this cornet for Christmas, a very difficult thing. I blew down, it makes absolutely no sound at all. And I blew another one, it made a dreadful sound. Looked like a difficult thing to learn. But then somebody gave me a record, an EP of Louis Armstrong's top five, hot five, hot five,
Right.
hot five. And I realized what a cornet was meant for. And so I set about really, it was hard work. It's a horrible instrument to learn because you have to practice. When you practice, your neighbors 5 or 6 doors up each way hear it and moan and groan and tell your parents to shut you up. There's no stimulation to learning it other than I fell in love with jazz.
Right.
And I listened to jazz nonstop. And to begin with, that was just trad jazz. So for 2 or 3 years, I listened endlessly to trad jazz. My bedroom was as a trad jazz 11-year-old's bedroom should be, covered with albums all around the wall. And finally, I went off to a boarding school where I was able to form a jazz band with 3 or 4 other kids who loved jazz. And luckily, they didn't all play the cornet, so we managed to actually make a band out of it.
Make a band, not all playing.
Piano, clarinet, a couple of piano, clarinet, drums, cornet. I thought it was probably something else I can't remember now. And we got quite good. And then in due course, I began to like modern jazz. And no one else at school, well, I guess they liked it, a few kids, but we didn't, no one could play it. I guess it was the harmonics for the keyboard. The piano player was stuck in trad jazz. So that was something I listened to rather than played. And finally, on my 18th birthday, when I was allowed to take control of my own life, I went to America. My idea was to become the world's greatest jazz musician. And I couldn't get into America because I could emigrate to Canada. So didn't seem far away. And
so you went to Canada instead?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's only a step across the border, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's how it felt. I felt like one of these modern Mexican immigrants. If you get to Mexico, you're nearly there. And but you were. I mean, in Canada in those days had no border control. You could just walk across the border or drive across the border. They didn't even look at your passport or check anything. So although I meant working in Canada, I could go to the States whenever I wanted, and I spent many weekends and days off going down to the States listening to jazz, but also playing it. Now by then I was a professional musician. I got work in Montreal in a pub. I played there for nearly 2 years. No jazz. You had to play pop songs. And this is the funny thing. You had to play pop songs because that's what pubs were for. And so I had to listen to the current pop songs and learn them. And I found out that between when I was 11 and pop was drivel, and when I was 18 or 19 and I had to play it because that's how to earn a living, that it had changed, that it had become really classy and good. And there were brilliant songs being written and great musicians. So I was listening to hit songs by Frank Sinatra, like Come Fly With Me, great. Fats Domino, Maybe Blueberry Hill. And suddenly pop music wasn't the awful stuff it had been before. So I became quite a convert to pop as well as jazz. And that was it, really. Then I was sort of fell in love with music, the music business, being a musician, until eventually I realized that I had to think a bit. I planned to be the greatest jazz musician. I wasn't even playing jazz. I wasn't very good. I could play a tune on the drum.
It wasn't going to happen.
No. And then what made it even worse is when I used to go and see these great jazz musicians, they weren't earning a living from it either. These people I had on my record, all my records were on my bedroom wall. You go and see these people and they play wonderful jazz. And then you'd find out they're actually earning a living doing just what I was doing, playing in big bands for dance bands, for shows, for striptease acts and nightclubs.
Right.
Very, very few people earned a living playing jazz. Very few. I mean, I would turn on television one night. I was in New York for a weekend. And I turned on television, and there was the New York Symphony, and sitting in the trumpet section were two famous jazz musicians. I thought, first of all, that amazed me because somehow my childhood upbringing, I confused jazz with complete ostracism of mainstream life. The fact that you could sit and play a symphony, a part in a symphony when you're a jazz musician seemed like you shouldn't have to do that or shouldn't do that. But just to see them and realize jazz didn't earn you a living. I'd chosen the wrong thing. So I thought, I'm not very good. It'll never earn me a living. I'll give it up. And I loved giving it up. I wasn't a natural trumpet player. I probably had to practice the trumpet 3 or 4 hours a day, every day for the previous 10 years. And so giving it up was like being let out of prison. That's gone. That 3 hours a day is your own. And I found it quite surprising. I absolutely loved not playing the trumpet anymore.
I was going to say, liberating.
It was incredible. I had friends who played the trumpet who were way better than me, who'd never practiced in their life. They just were natural trumpet players.
Naturally adept.
And you can learn from almost. I'm sure even an incompetent person could learn to play football up to a very high standard, but you were never going to be one in the Premier League.
Right.
And you have to just choose the thing which suits you physically or mentally. But I then realized that I liked what the music business represented. Not so much the music, just the whole structure and the fun and the gossip and the challenge. And so after a period in the film industry, when I came back to London and worked as assistant film editor, I got myself into the music business, but with a musical background, so I didn't feel completely inept.
So the film editing.
Well, what happened is I came back to England from America or Canada, decided not to be a jazz musician, and managed to get myself a very junior position in films, which is then a cutting room assistant, which did almost nothing at all, and learnt about editing film and worked up from there, and then became a good assistant editor, a well-paid one on good films. And then along came a film for me to work on, which was What's New Pussycat, where they needed a music editor. And because I could read and write music, they said, oh, we'll promote you. So suddenly I was a music editor. That's a well-paid job. And better still, the person writing the music was Burt Bacharach, who they
exactly. This is what brings us to Burt Bacharach.
So suddenly, here I am in the music industry working with Burt Bacharach, who was a sort of hero already, because I thought he was a genius songwriter. And by then, all those Dionne Warwick songs had been hits, and we all knew them and loved them. And but he'd never written a film score before, and this was the surprising thing. In a film, there are 40 or 50 sections which need a bit of music. And really, most film scores are one tune, which is then, developed and made into different moods, but goes right through the film. There might be a second theme, but no good film score has more than a couple of themes running through it. That's what makes a film score. Right. And Burt, who'd never done a film score before, turned up at the studio on the day we were recording, with 40 tunes, one for each section. And it just wasn't a film score. Wasn't You Pussycat was brilliant. And there was another song in there he did with Dionne Warwick, which is pretty good. But all the other things just didn't work. They just made the film fragmented. And he flew back to America. And the day after, the producer and director of the film called me in and said, what do? We have to use his music. It's in the contract. We have to use his music. But it's not a score. We need a score. Could you help? You know, I'm a 25-year-old precocious little kid, you know. God, yes, I could help. I could do this. And so I stayed there in the cutting room for 2 months nonstop, taking the two songs which were great, Wasn't You Pussycat and the other one, and turning them into a film score, cutting them up, changing around, messing them about, with no respect whatsoever for poor old.
Bacharach's music.
As an adult looking back, I thought, what a shit I was. But I had great fun. And at the end, there was a film score. It was okay. And it went down quite well too. When I heard later that when Burt went to the premiere of the film in New York, the New York premiere, he stormed out after 5 minutes because his music desecrated. I mean, what's the title thing? The title's great, that's as it should be. So once it's finished, suddenly you get into the film yourself, suddenly his music's there, mashed up, cut about. He stormed out the fury. But the next day...
Did you ever see him again?
Yep, yeah. The next day, the New York Times film critic said, in Burt Bacharach, we found a new master of the film score. And so he very graciously called me up and we became friends.
So it went from anger to friendship.
Yeah, well, pretty much so. Yeah, I mean, I saw him quite a lot. Many, many years later, when WHAM were on tour and I was managing when they played at the LA racecourse, you know, he was the first person to say, can I have a VIP ticket? I want to come on and want to bring Dionne along. 22 years later. So, yeah, that was all right.
And you worked with Dusty Springfield as well?
Well, that sort of was my real entry into the music business. I mean, doing this music with Burt, I was still in the film business as a music editor, but I was now a rather wealthy young music editor because I got paid a lot of money. And so I started going to all the trendy clubs in London and met all the trendy people. And I enjoyed this. This was a good life. It was a club. The famous one was called the Ad Lib, which was a very glossy club full of Beatles and Rolling Stones and film stars. And I mean, I was at the bottom of the pile, you know, because I wasn't really in the entertainment business. I was just a technician. But I had a flashy car, which helped. I'd spent all my money. Anyone else would have gone out. All the money I made from that film, anyone else would have gone out and bought a house.
You bought a car?
I bought a car. You could buy a house in Belgravia for about £8,000, which would now be worth about 20 million. Yeah. And I spent exactly that much on an imported Ford Thunderbird convertible, which would now probably fetch about £500 if you're lucky.
Really?
But it gave me a lot of fun, and it got me in the music business
at the time. Yeah, it served its purpose.
It was the right car to get if you wanted to get in the Ad Lib club, and you shouldn't really be there. That was the right car to arrive in. And then I began to make friends when I went to the club, and around 2 o'clock in the morning every day, I had to go home because I had to sleep 3 or 4 hours so I could get to the studio and work.
At least.
And I'd say to my friends, how come you don't have to go home? You know, I've got to go home and sleep for 3 hours. How can you still stay here? They said, we're in the music business. So I thought, that's the business to get into. And then one of my friends was Vicky Wickham. She was the booking producer for Ready, Steady, Go, which was the absolute #1 music TV show. And she said to me one day, Dusty Springfield's just come back from Italy. And she's brought a song. It was the winning song this year in the San Remo Festival. And she wants to do it in English. Where would she get lyrics? And I said, why don't we write them? So Vicky said, well, because we've never written lyrics before. And I said, that's not the sort of thing that stops me. Let's have a try. And
I like that, though. I like that.
Well, what stops me usually is I have done it before, which makes it boring. So if I haven't done it before, I'm more likely to try it. So we went back to her flat one night after dinner and sat listening to this scratchy acetate that Dusty had brought back from Italy. And the song is this magnificent intro and glamorous trumpet sounds and brass and drum roll. and it's Italian. And so I said to Vicky, you know, it's got to be a love song. We have to say I love you. And we were very unromantic. You know, the 60s was not a romantic time. It was the 1950s was romantic time. The 60s was shagging time. The pill had been invented. Suddenly romance didn't matter, just get out and shag. And so I said, you know, the song's got to say I love you. And Vicky said, oh, no, that's not I love you. It's so boring and commonplace. So I said, no, well, I don't love you. And she said, all right, that's a bit in your face, isn't it? So then I said, oh, I don't have to love you. And then we made it, you don't have to love me. And that didn't quite fit. And then we put two more words, and you don't have to say you love me. And that really fitted well, and it sounded good. And it, you know, we thought we'd hit on a really nice line. And well, we had. And as you heard, Dusty made it sound pretty good later.
Absolutely.
But I only realized later that although we thought we'd come up quite sort of spontaneously with this wonderful romantic line, it wasn't really a romantic line. It was exactly in line with our lack of romance, because it was a pulling line. You know, if it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning at the Ad Lib Club or one of these flashy nightclubs we went to, and there was someone sitting next to you you really fancied, you wanted to pull them, you know, you really wanted, you say, come on, let's go home and have a shag, and they have some good sex, and they say, oh no, I can't do that. I don't really know you. And you say, oh, come on, you don't have to say you love me or anything like that. And so in a way, what we've done,
with the times.
Yeah, it wasn't quite what other people saw it as being. No, and we didn't even realize that ourselves at the time. But yeah, there it was, deep in our psyche, and we dug it up, and we got a #1 record.
Indeed, you did. So when did you go into management?
Well, that seemed to be the best way to step out of film business into music business. So
right,
I found it was very interesting. I wanted to do it, and I didn't know how. And I had this idea. I met a young black girl, West Indian girl, who came for an audition for a film I was working on. She had to, we needed a singer, and she turned up. And you know, I thought, this is a really very pretty girl, sings very well. Maybe one day, you know, I might try and do something with her management-wise. And then there was a young guy I knew who was quite small, quite short and blonde, and really sort of pretty looking. And I thought, wow, they'd make an incredible couple if they went together. So I had the idea to make a duet with these two. And then I found out something which totally amazed me, that there had never been a mixed race music group ever in the UK, leave alone in America. Yeah. There had been black singers who sang with white dance bands, but there had never been a mixed race act. And now it sounds impossible. But to be honest, even in the 60s, that sounded impossible. How could there not have been? For what reason? I mean, it was just extraordinary to me. And so I sort of saw a big advantage to this. I put them together. They were delightful. I made a pretty awful record. I wrote the song myself. I produced it myself, and it was really not very good. I don't think I knew that at the time. I thought it was rather wonderful. When I listen
no one
now,
writes a song and thinks it's not great.
I certainly cringe now when I hear it. But then, and the way you got hit records in those days was not by radio play, but by television. Actually, still much the same. But the reason was the Musicians Union didn't allow the BBC to play records. And so when all hit records were played by dance bands or accordion trios or cheap little combos the BBC put together to play live, because the Musicians Union insisted that all music on the radio was live. And so records, you made a record, you couldn't get a radio player, it didn't exist. But television wasn't subject to that. And so there were lots of television pop programs or variety programs which had a spot for a pop record where you might get your record played. But this is the pop, this is the boom, this is the middle of the 60s. There were 40 or 50 very well-known artists, from the Beatles down to Crispin St. Peters and, you know, Spencer Davis. I mean, just endless groups and artists. Yeah. And every time there was a slot of one of these programs, it was instantly taken. But I had a very beautiful picture taken of my black-white duo, naked from the neck up. It's just an extraordinary thing. I realized if you took somebody's shirt off and took the picture from the shoulders up,
looks like they're naked.
It's all skin, and the you know, the rather purient nature of human beings presumes it's going to be naked below there as well. Yeah. And so it was a scandalous shot, although there was nothing even remotely scandalous about it. And I picked the best of these, and I had it blown up to A4, A6. I can't remember what it is. It's A5, I think it is, but it's that very, very big size, which is far too big to go anywhere except stick on the wall.
Yeah.
And I found some envelopes that size, hardback envelopes, and had 80 copies made and put them into 80 hardback envelopes and posted them to every single radio, television, producer, DJ, presenter in the whole of England. And in those days, we had a postal service, and you had your first delivery at 6:30 in the morning. So I knew that the next morning at 6:30, all over England, all the top television producers be woken up by the postman saying, "Sorry, Gov, couldn't get it through the letterbox." And they then look at it. And then I phoned them up. And I said, one by one, I phoned them up. "Will you play the record?" They couldn't play the record. This is a new record by a new artist. There are hundreds of new records by new artists every week. And the only free slots had to go to the already well-known artists.
Right.
So they'd say whatever they had to say. "Oh, love the song, but not sure about this," or "Love the girl's voice, not sure about the boy, love the voice, but not sure about the girl." All the crap people say when they turn things down. And I was really horrible. I was really, really nasty. And I just said, "You're racist, aren't you? It's because she's black and he's white." And of course, television producers are the least likely people, and they're all from liberal backgrounds. They'd all say, no, I'm not. That's ridiculous. That's not why it is." And I said, it is. It's, I demand. I'm going to write an article for the Sunday Times about it, about this shocking thing I've discovered, that the whole of British television is racist. And I got every television show, 8 television shows.
Really?
It was amazing. And it was a hit. This awful
Called their
record.
bluff. Called their bluff, yeah.
It was extraordinary. And we got a hit record. And they were pretty enough and the record was well made, but it wasn't a hit song. It was just because it got this exposure.
What were they called? I don't remember.
Diane Ferraz and Nikki Scott. You don't look like you'd remember. You weren't even, whatever it happens, when the sperm goes up the vagina. I don't think you've got to that stage yet.
No, I don't think I had. But, I do know music from back then, but I thought I might have heard of it.
You can find it. You could look it up and find it. You'll then agree with me. It's not a very good record. She had a bit of a squeaky voice, which I don't like in girls. I liked it then. I don't know. When I listen now, I think would never be a hit voice. But anyway, look, it was a hit. And as a result of that, the Yardbirds, who were probably the number 3 rock group in the entire world, there was the Beatles, the Stones, the Yardbirds were number 3.
Right, yeah.
They wanted to change their manager. So they called me up and said, "Would you like to manage us?" And always eager to do things I've never done before, I said yes. And that was it. I got this hit with Dusty Springfield and I started managing the Yardbirds. And so I sort of fell into the music business at the top, if you see what I mean.
There's one thing, though, that I really like that I'm hearing, and that's what this whole show is about, the inspiration that people bring. That thing that you keep saying, the fact that I'd never done it before, made me want to do it. And I think that adventurous nature is what, opens your world to stuff that you might not otherwise know that you're capable of succeeding in or even attempting, just being able to have the courage to say, I've never done that before. I haven't got any training in it or anything, but I'm just going to try it. If they can do it.
Do you know how often it is, how often not knowing about something is a huge advantage? Because you're not bound by all the rules which everyone else that knows about it knows you can't do. Like when I started managing Yardbirds, I wanted to get them a new deal so they had more royalty and a big advance. And I went off to EMI. I didn't know anything about the music business. So what I asked for was ridiculous. And anyone who knew about the music business knew that you couldn't get that big royalty or couldn't get that much upfront money.
Right.
And today I wouldn't dare ask for something so out of line, but I didn't know. I just took a gamble. This sounds like a reasonable amount. Let's ask for it. And then I sat there, rigid and refused to give way, and they paid it. And I couldn't have done that if I'd known anything about the music business. So not knowing about things can often be quite a big advantage.
And you just plucked a figure out and asked for it.
I wasn't stupid in the figure I arrived at. I knew how much records sold for, and I thought you know, how much is the lease of a building cost, and how much you pay employees, and what would the record companies cost me? And I worked out in a logical way what I thought a record company should take out of a record and what they should pay. And probably what I'd worked out is the truth. That is what they should pay.
Yeah,
but that isn't what they paid, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously I had worked out more or less the truth, because 10 years down the line, that was the sort of amount they paid. But at that time, they didn't. And so it shocked everybody. And it didn't shock me at the time, because I still hadn't realized I'd asked for something so excessive. But looking back now, it was pretty good. You know, and I also kept the rights to the music. So every other artist signed, when they signed a record contract, they gave all the copyright in the music for the life of the copyright. So they gave it up forever. It's gone. You know, you sign a contract, you give it to the record company. Still do that today. And I didn't do that either, because I didn't know that's what you're meant to do. So, you know, they said, what about, are you signing, you know, right? They just automatically put down lifelong rights. So I said, no, you can't do that. You can, as long as we're signed to the contract, you can have them. And they said, no, that's ridiculous. They got their own way a bit, but, you know, 10 years later, they got all their rights back, which no other group did. Wow. So, you know, ignorance, what's the old expression? Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bloody useful.
Yeah. In some, as you say, that's the thing. You're not bound by restricted by the things that are laid down beforehand. You're coming into it with fresh eyes and just thinking, well, I want to do this, and I think that's possible. This is possible. Let's do it. You know,
I think you'll find that in every industry, there have been some major figures who've come in and been very successful, sort of like that. You know, even in DJing or interviewing, people who don't know what you're meant to do just approach it in a better way, in a good light.
Yeah, it's fresh and organic, I say. Organic. So with the management, I'm looking at the list of people from Boney M to, of course, the great mighty WHAM. How did all that happen?
It just flowed along. I don't really know. I'm quite a sort of I'm not an ambitious.
Is it all a blur now?
No, it's not a blur. I mean, I'm very good at remembering. But what I meant is, you know, you're saying two ways. How did it happen? Suggests I knew before it happened how it was happening, what I was doing to make it happen. I can remember how it happened afterwards. But I was not. I've never been ambitious. I've never had any ambition in my life at all. You know, when I was at school and master scene, what are you going to do when you grow up? You're going to decide what you're going to do and work towards. Yeah, I mean, I only became a jazz musician because I didn't know what to do, and they all knew I played the trumpet. So I said, "Oh, I'll become a musician," and they sort of didn't like that much, but at least I was saying I was going to do something. But once I'd given that up, I didn't have any ambition. I liked life. I like wake up in the morning, see what's happening, you know, travel around, walk around, have a coffee, see what's going on. And so to move forwards, I always needed to be tied to something. I mean, one thing which ties you is if you sign a contract, you're now going to have to fulfill what your contract says. The thing about management is you'd meet someone, they'd say, you know, I want to be a huge star, and how do I do it? And you'd look at what they can do and what they were doing and make some reasonable objective judgment of what they should do and tell them, you know, and they'd say, hey, wow, that's amazing, man. You know, you ought to manage me. And if I agreed, then I was effectively contracted, or I had a responsibility. I'm very good at fulfilling responsibility. So, you know, not being motivated doesn't mean I don't work hard at what I have to do, but I don't have any personal ambition. It's their ambition. So when I manage an artist, I'm not managing because I want them to succeed so I can be very rich. I just said I'll do it, and I want to do it. It's like doing a crossword puzzle. I don't give up. I don't give up crossword puzzles halfway through. If I'm in a hurry, the worst thing I could ever do if I've got 10 minutes to waste is start a crossword puzzle, because if I haven't finished it in 10 minutes, I'm going to sit there and finish it, you know. And that's the same with these things. It's games, and once I start the game, I'm damn well going to finish it.
Yeah.
And so but it's their commitment, not mine. Their ambition, not mine.
Yeah. And you managed Marc Bolan as well?
Yeah. Marc Bolan, Japan, I don't know, Ultravox, Asia, Boney M, WHAM.
That's what I'm saying. The bar goes up, 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 up all the time.
Well, it's come down a bit these days. I make films these days. You see, I've given up that, gone back to the film industry.
Oh, we'll get to that in a bit.
Wow, look at the time.
WHAM, you got WHAM out of the UK and into, well, all over the world.
Yeah, well, they were pretty well all over the world already. The records get the artists around the world. What they hadn't done really was they wanted to be. When I first met Wham, and I had a business partner and a management partner too, and we went to dinner with them. You know, we sat down to plan what we could do for them. And George said, we want to be the biggest group in the world, and you've got a year, which just made me laugh, because the biggest group in the world has to be the biggest group in America, because they had 60% of the world market. And no group had ever broken America under 3 or 4 years. I mean, the Beatles had been playing for 7 years before they broke America. You know, the media can make it look like overnight success, but that isn't the truth. And so I just laughed and said, you know, that's ridiculous. But George was very arrogant and very pushy, and that's great, because, like I just said, that is what the manager needs to make the group succeed. You know, if the group says, "Oh well, man, you know, whatever you can, please," it's not going to happen, because you're going to go home and forget it.
Yeah.
So you've got this pressure on you, and but you know, it isn't impossible. You can't break a group in America in a year. But they'd already had big hit in England. They'd had a small hit in America, but they wanted to be the biggest group in the world, and so over more discussion, came a casual idea from somebody, I'm not sure who. You know, maybe we could make you the first group ever to play in communist China. And George liked that. He said, "Yeah, okay, you know, just do that. That'll do. Fine, thank you." And so that's suddenly what I was stuck with doing, which didn't worry me, because I love going to Asia. I love Asia, so I live here now. And my partner could do all the hard work, stay in London, do what I didn't much want to do. And
Right.
so I set off almost immediately for this impossible task of, you know, China then was not what it is today. It was completely closed down, communist. Visitors couldn't come in without official invitations from the government. They could only come in to do government business or business on behalf of the government. And so I first had to find a way to get a visa and get in illicitly, actually. And then, well, in a country like China, who can say, yes, we'll invite out me, the president of China? So I did find, a week later, 2 weeks later, I found myself in China illegally with a visa which I'd got by paying somebody, bribing somebody, sitting in a cold, wet hotel in the middle of winter. And it finally dawned on me, the only person in China who can invite them to play is the president of China, probably the second or third most important person in the entire world. How do I get from this hotel room to him?
Yeah.
And it took me a long time. It took me
Right.
18 months. No, not a long time. I know you should call it a long time or a short time. 18 months it took me. And then finally, Wham played in China. And when they played in China, that day they played in Beijing, they were on ABC, or that week they played in Beijing. They were in America on ABC, CBS, NBC News, 24/7, non-stop. By the end of the week, there was no one in America didn't know the name Wham, or 2 or 3 of their songs at least. And we played our first stadium tour to about 20 months after that first dinner, when he said, "Make us the biggest group in the world in a year." So we'd done it in a year and a half, not a year. And funny enough, at that same gig, the gig I told you, Burt Bacharach came with Dion, the LA race course, Elton was there too. And after the gig, Elton came bursting in the dressing room and he said, "Oh, wonderful gig." He said, "But you bastards, you did it. It took me 8 years and you've done it in a year and a half." And so George turned to me and said, "You see, you failed."
You failed. Brilliant. So then you're an author as well. You've written 3 books.
Well, I thought instead of putting up with all these long conversations with people, I could write some books and they could read the books.
And they could just read them.
And I wouldn't have to do all this.
It's not the same.
I know you've read them. It's perhaps all your listeners and viewers haven't read them. So it's my way of telling them to get out there and buy these books and read them. Actually, that's what I always intended to do. You know, when I gave up playing the trumpet all those years ago, that was what I decided I'd do. I decided I'd be a writer, because I figured if I was going to be a writer, I didn't have to do anything. I mean, I gave up the trumpet. And I was standing there thinking, now what do I do? And
Yeah.
I decided I'd hitchhike around America. And to give myself a little objective, I decided I'd hitchhike to every state, which you could do in those days because Hawaii wasn't a state, nor was Alaska. And so I set about doing that. But as I stood by the road waiting for lifts every day, my thumb out, my little English teenage thumb sticking out, trying to get a lift to God knows where and God knows why, really.
Not even knowing where you wanted to go, just somewhere.
Oh, why? But I thought I should be a writer, because if I'm a writer, it doesn't matter what you do. All you've got to do is you've got to do something, say, for 10 years. No one wants to read a 20-year-old book. But by the time you're 30, you've got a bit of, bit of experience. So all I've got to do is anything I want for 10 years. I mean, just do what you want for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, you'll have plenty to write about. And that let me off the next 10 years. I didn't have to think about this problem again. So I just allowed myself to drift around and do whatever I wanted.
Well, an inspiration right there. Just be a free spirit and do what you feel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got guided by whatever was happening, or if you were hungry, food would guide you. In general, I mean, my decision was the only thing which had a real powerful impact on how you felt every day was your dick, wasn't it? It stands up and points, and here you are wondering what you're going to do for the day, and that is telling you what you'd like to do, which hasn't even gone through your brain. It's a shortcut to somewhere, excluding the thought part of the brain. So really, I just thought, well, that's good enough. It'll guide me around. So I don't think that's very different from most young people. It's just that with me, it was a bit more deliberate or accepting of the situation. So I just said, well, where it points, I follow. That's fine. And I did that until I fell in the music business, which wasn't 10 years at all. It was about 5 years, as I explained.
Right. So now you said you've gone back into filmmaking or editing.
Well, I mean, what happened is I hitchhiked for 2 or 3 years, and I'm following that premise. I mean, I learned a lot about life and a lot about myself, and I realized I was gay too, and that I liked that because that seemed a good reason for not joining mainstream society and doing what everyone else wanted to do, and it's a good way to shock people. I always like that. Some pleasant person will pick you up in a car and chat to you and ask what you've done. And, America is full of extremely pleasant, generous middle-class people who, will give a lift and a bit of advice to someone by the road. And, they say, I tell them I played the trumpet and I got bored with it. I'm hitchhiking around. And they say, well, you sooner or later you have to get married and have children. This is 1964, 2. And I say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm gay. And they'd be so fucking shocked. You wouldn't believe it. I mean, no one ever said that. I don't think even people knew what it meant exactly. They knew a little bit what it meant. So I mean, I quite enjoyed this ability to appear relatively normal than to shock people. I think I still enjoy that now, but it hasn't gone anywhere really.
So you said you've relocated to Asia. Where in Asia are you?
Well, I live in Thailand. I've lived in Thailand now for 25 years, but I mean, I'm working. This is where I lived. Like you might live in Barnes or Putney or Manchester. Right. And of course, now with all these methods of communication, it really doesn't make any difference. Because if I was in London right now, we'd still be talking on Zoom because you'd be one end of London, I'd be the other. So things have changed a lot. And this is not inconvenient at all. But I have business in England. I'm making films, and mainly I make them in England, but some are in Australia. And I have a show running in Las Vegas, which has been running for 10 years. So I'm between raiding the rock vault. It's been voted best show in Vegas for 10 years, right? Best music show in Vegas for 10 years, right? And so I until COVID was doing a lot of business in China. So what seems like a remote place, Thailand, if you look at the atlas, it's pretty well dead center. It's the same flying time from here to Los Angeles, from here to London, from here to actually New York and Los Angeles are virtually the same time. From here to Sydney. So I'm pretty much in the middle. Wherever I'm needed, I jump on a plane and get there.
Yeah, and as you said, with the mediums of communication now, it really doesn't matter where you are. You can reside anywhere.
Well, I think if you're in the middle of the Antarctic, it would be not very helpful. But
no,
it is good communication.
That in the realm, the Antarctic wasn't even in my thoughts.
But you know, well, you said anywhere, but communicate. It's got to have communication. As long as you're on a good communication link, and Thailand is, you know, totally a first world country when it comes to communications and and lifestyles within the capital city. So it's a good place to live.
So show running in Vegas, best show, voted best show for 10 years, you said?
Now, there's a thing called Best in Vegas, and it's got the music show category for 10 years in a row. It was it was a long time ago in India, at oh God, when was it? It must be 20 years ago now, 18 years ago. I was in India, in Bangalore, sitting in a rock nightclub called the Purple Haze, creating my own Purple Haze with a bit of champagne. And about 1 or 2 in the morning, I remember sitting there and the DJ was playing rock tracks, as you would do in a club called Purple Haze. No soul, no funk, but just rock. But he was playing one after another, just the best rock tracks ever. If I was that DJ, I think every time he finished a track, the one he put on next would have been the one I'd have chosen. I was so impressed. I thought, this guy's amazing. He's me, you know. And so when I got up to go to the loo, I thought I'd just go across and thank him for being such a genius at selecting the right tracks. And it was a covers band. And I was really shocked. I thought, really, I might be a bit drunk, but I've been in the music industry for 30 years. I should be able to tell the difference between covers and the real thing.
Right.
And so I came back from the loo thinking it was a genius covers band, but there are a few around like that. And I sat down and I thought, you know, this is what the world needs. This is something you never hear. You need a live band of the highest caliber playing the greatest rock tunes. And so I there and then got the idea of creating a show which was the best rock musicians in the world, not a pickup band, not a new band, not a tribute band, but the best musicians in the world playing a set of 2 hours of the greatest rock songs, the ones everyone knows. I mean, there's probably 100. We had to whittle it down to 40 or 50. And the way we did it, I did that with a partner too, is we have a band which is the best 8, 10, usually 2 singers, the 10 best available rock musicians. I mean, if recently we had Doug Aldrich, who was Whitesnake's guitarist. Whitesnake went on tour, so he goes off on tour with Whitesnake, and we got in Tracy Guns, you know, reasonably well known, Guns N' Roses and LA Guns and things like that. And then he has to go off, go to form his own band. And so we bring in someone. So they're always the very top people who are not on the road at that moment. Yeah. And it's always an absolutely incredible band. And they love it, because if you're in Whitesnake or Asia or whatever you're in, you don't get a chance to play Rolling Stones songs or other songs because you're not allowed to. You know, you're Whitesnake. You can't go around playing covers of other people's songs. And suddenly they're allowed to play all these songs which they've loved, just like we all have, all their lifetime.
Which was probably their inspiration to do what they're doing, but they can now play the tracks.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, Tracy Guns, of all of them, I thought Tracy, who's so sort of off the wall and he's such a, you know, a sort of avant-garde sort of music person. I thought he probably only does this because I don't know why he's doing it really, but he's got a gap in his life. And he took me aside one night and he said, "This is the best thing I've ever done. I've never enjoyed anything more." For that very reason. These are all the songs I've always wanted to play and felt a bit ashamed to play, you know, because I'm.
And it sounds like it's organized brilliantly that they can still have their careers outside.
Of course.
And
this gives them a real foundation. Nearly all the musicians we've got, and we've got a pool of about 50 or 60 musicians, it's 10 years now. Nearly all of them have bought houses in Vegas since they started working with us and have moved to Vegas. So that's become, they haven't changed their lives. They still go on tour with their groups, but they're focused on Vegas. They've become settled. And when they come home, they can come and join us and play for us for 6 or 8 weeks. So it's really, we didn't plan that. That just has come from doing it. But it's become a really successful project.
Brilliant. So what has Simon Napier-Bell got in store for us next? Or doesn't he know yet?
Oh, some more films. No, I don't want, I mean, films is really what I'm doing now. Yeah, I mean, last year, 2, 3 years ago, I made a film about George Michael, Portrait of an Artist. That came out last year, was very successful. But I mean, came out almost simultaneously with the WHAM film. So they sort of helped each other a great deal because they're complementary. So that came out last year, did well. And COVID rather stopped my filmmaking. I mean, I'd done 3 in the 3 years leading up to COVID. And then COVID rather stopped it. And it's all back to normal now. So this year there will be...
What are the films? Because we don't know what these films are.
Well, you may do. I mean, the first one I made was about Frank Sinatra. It's what would have been his 100th birthday. Right. And they're all 90-minute documentaries on Netflix and things like that. The Frank Sinatra was called, I think it's called To Be Frank, or Frank Sinatra at 100. That was on Netflix. Then I made 27 Gone Too Soon, which is about the 27 Club. You know, there's 6 famous rock musicians who all died at the age of 27. Right. That was the Netflix 90-minute film on Netflix. Then I made 50 Years Legal, which was to mark the 50th anniversary of the decriminalization of homosexuality in England. That was for Sky Arts. It's still one of their most streamed films. And then George Michael, Portrait of an Artist. That's on Channel 4 in the UK and Amazon Prime everywhere else.
Right.
And then this year I've got 3 films actually. They won't all get finished this year, but I'm working on 3 films. One which is primarily about me in a sort of roundabout way, sort of my life, but in a very peculiar arty way, which I think is quite fun. One will be about the trip of WHAM went to China, the whole way I set it up and organized it, and what happened there. And we're making that with the George Michael estate, so that will be an official film. That'll look good. And a third one I'm not going to tell you about.
Like, why is that?
Well, it's good to have a bit of mystery, isn't it?
Okay. So there's another one that we need to look out for.
Yeah, but they won't be tomorrow. Films aren't like records. You don't make them now, they come out next month. Absolutely. You start making them now and they come out a year down the line.
Or even later.
And one of the things about film industry, which is really important, is while you're making the film, you've got to be setting up the next one. Because if you wait till it comes out, you're going to have a year's gap with nothing to do. It's not like records. You can't finish your record, put it out, and think, yeah, I might start thinking about a new one. If you do that, you have 2 or 3 years with nothing to do. So the really important thing about filmmaking is you're both making a film and preparing the next one, always at the same time.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Simon Napier-Bell, it has been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for telling us your story. And all the best with your future projects.
I don't know your story. You come onto me as an unknown person. You see, Mr. Barry Thomas, it's just a name. And I know nothing about you. Do you ever tell your listeners all about you?
No, I'm not interesting enough.
You might be.
I don't know. I'm not interesting enough. Maybe you'll interview me at a later date on one of your films.
Yeah, well, or on your program. We'll reverse this one.
Reverse the roles. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're definitely one of the icons of the industry. And we wanted to know a bit more about you on a more personal level, not just reading facts from... It's very nice to talk to you and for you to take the time out to share your story with us here.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much. All the best. And we will keep in touch.